and Ryan Manook, Senior Consulting Engineer. But first, I have a few brief housekeeping notes. For the best experience, we recommend that you use a broadband connection for today's presentation. If you have any technical issues, please call LogMeIn technical support at 833-851-8340. During today's presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. Simply go to the GoToWebinar control panel, click the questions section, enter your question, and we'll enter and ask as many questions as time allows. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Steve Romig. Steve?
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm thrilled to talk to you all about the release of FileMaker Cloud, your total tool set for low-code application development. We will spend the next few minutes highlighting the importance of FileMaker Cloud and where it fits in our platform as a service strategy. Let's get started. FileMaker Cloud is not just a new product for Claris and the FileMaker platform. It is also the first step in the overarching future forward strategy of the company. We can measure success moving forward by emphasizing these 4 pillars of technology that are shown on the screen. The first pillar is Cloud First. By developing new technologies that are compatible with the cloud, FileMaker Cloud and other Claris products will be faster to market, will allow for more collaborative and collaboration with other technologies, especially other cloud technologies. And with every passing day, more and more best-of-breed digital experiences are happening in the cloud, and Claris will need to deliver on that promise of the workplace innovative platform by making these powerful technologies accessible to everyone. The second pillar is providing a rich, intuitive, and native experience for all our products when used in a browser and on all the mobile devices you choose to use. The third pillar is integrations. We want to make it easier for you all to work with your data regardless of what service or application it resides in. Our goal is to seamlessly and efficiently stitch together the technologies that you use and provide you with the power to automate and create efficient workflows and digital experiences. And the fourth and last pillar is supporting emerging or advancing technologies. We will provide support for things like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and augmented reality, just to name a few. We will continue to prepare for and make investments to allow alignment with new and emerging technologies. But before we move on, let's take a deeper look at the first pillar I talked about and discuss our cloud-first strategy. Many of today's best innovations and digital experiences are happening in the cloud, and that is going to continue into the future. Consumers expect the technology they are using to have some sort of cloud component to it. And our competition is also embracing the cloud. So, if all the best innovations and digital experiences are in the cloud, adopting a cloud-first strategy will help Claris deliver on the promise of powerful technology that is accessible to all of you, as well as providing a customer experience to you that matches your expectations. So as part of this, we want to help you migrate to the cloud if and when it makes sense for you. We will provide tools and guidance on how to get your data into the cloud in the best way possible. And lastly, we want to standardize on the on-premise offerings. We recognize that FileMaker Cloud may not make sense for all of you, that you will not be able to immediately flip the switch and migrate your data to the cloud. And that's okay. That is why the on-premise version of FileMaker Server is an important part of the FileMaker platform and is not going away anytime soon. But in order to offer you support for the latest technologies and provide requested features faster, we will move forward by maintaining the latest versions of the FileMaker product line on the latest operating systems. Now, many of you probably know that FileMaker Cloud runs on AWS. If you didn't, you do now. But what you might not know is that we own the underlying infrastructure. We have 3 dedicated teams at Claris monitoring FileMaker Cloud 24/7. Whether you are thinking about security, development, or updates and performance, our ops teams are constantly watching over your data. And since we now own the cloud infrastructure, we can deliver the best security, reliability, and availability while preparing for better services and collaborations in the future. Now, purchasing FileMaker Cloud couldn't be easier. For many of you, you'll purchase FileMaker Cloud directly from the FileMaker store. For others, you might find the purchasing of FileMaker Cloud easier to do through an FBA partner. And for those of you who have specific questions or needs, you can purchase FileMaker Cloud by contacting the Claris sales team. And as a side note, FileMaker Cloud is not available in Japan or China at this time. However, Japan customers can still continue to purchase FileMaker Cloud for AWS. At launch, the Seoul data center is located in the Western United States, with plans to quickly bring up other data centers around the world. FileMaker Cloud will be available in countries that have a FileMaker store. Now, during the purchasing process, you specify the initial number of users your instance of FileMaker Cloud will support. And based on the number of users, your FileMaker Cloud instance will automatically be configured using an appropriate compute size. There is not an additional charge for the compute size as it pertains to the user count specified. So for example, if you move from 5 users to 15 users, you will get the T2 large compute at no additional cost. With that said, you can independently upgrade your compute size at any time if your custom app requires it without having to increase your user count. A few more fast facts about FileMaker Cloud. FileMaker Cloud supports hosting of up to 125 custom apps at one time. Your annual storage limit, or the amount of storage available for your custom apps and externally stored container data, is based on a simple calculation of user count times 6 gigabytes. So, if you had a 5-user license, your available total storage would be 30 gigabytes. Now, it is worth noting that the backup functionality of FileMaker Cloud uses a separate storage system and does not use your annual storage limit. And the 5.4 terabyte limit listed on the screen is per FileMaker Cloud instance and not per hosted custom app. FileMaker ID is an integrated single sign-on system that allows you to work with files hosted by FileMaker Cloud. All FileMaker Cloud users are required to have a FileMaker ID to create a FileMaker Cloud instance and is the only authentication method supported to access FileMaker Cloud hosted custom apps. Individual FileMaker ID users can be organized by a team manager into groups, which allow for the FileMaker ID users in that group to have the same access privileges to hosted apps and other team resources. The process of uploading a custom app to FileMaker Cloud is a familiar one, as it is similar to uploading a custom app to FileMaker Server or FileMaker Cloud for AWS. However, before you upload a custom app to FileMaker Cloud, you must add the appropriate FileMaker ID users and groups to that custom app from the Managed Security dialog box in FileMaker Pro Advanced. Now, while we're on the subject of security, it is worth noting that all custom apps uploaded to FileMaker Cloud must be secure. This means that all accounts that have a full access privilege must have a password associated with them. And one final note, if you store your container data externally, the container data must be securely stored. External open storage for container data is not supported in FileMaker Cloud. Now, the new kid on the block with the introduction of FileMaker Cloud is the FileMaker Customer Console. The FileMaker Customer Console is a web application for working with your custom apps hosted by FileMaker Cloud and is also used to manage FileMaker ID teams including FileMaker ID accounts, users, groups, hosts, settings, and FileMaker Cloud subscriptions. Keep in mind that the FileMaker Customer Console is not a substitute for the FileMaker Cloud Admin Console, which still exists and is similar to the FileMaker Server Admin Console or FileMaker Cloud for AWS Admin Console. So with that, let's welcome Ryan Manook, Senior Consulting Engineer, to give us a demo of FileMaker Cloud.
Okay, so we'll click on the Users tab here. Now, alongside FileMaker Cloud, Claris has introduced its own identity provider called FileMaker ID. And FileMaker ID, it impacts many areas of FileMaker Cloud. For example, you need a FileMaker ID account to create a FileMaker Cloud instance. It's the sole authentication method for accessing FileMaker Cloud hosted apps. And you need a FileMaker ID account to run data API requests. So FileMaker ID accounts, they're tied to a user's email address, and each user should have their own unique FileMaker ID account. You cannot share FileMaker ID accounts amongst multiple users. All right, so let's click Invite New User to begin adding FileMaker ID users to our cloud team. Now, this Invite New Users window, it has three actions. First, we can enter an email address for the user that we would like to add to our team. And if the user already has an existing FileMaker ID account, that's great. We'll make sure to enter that email address here. If the user does not have an existing FileMaker ID account, if this is their first time using FileMaker Cloud, then they'll be prompted to create one. Second, choose to enable the invited user as a licensed user. And doing so means this invited user, they'll be able to immediately have access to the team's FileMaker Cloud hosted apps. And then third, we can choose to enable the invited user as a team manager. And a team manager, they have the ability to manage licensed users and make decisions about the FileMaker Cloud system and maintenance changes. Now keep in mind, the choices made here for the licensed user and the team manager, it's not a permanent one. We can change those at any time later on in the FileMaker Customer Console. It's also important to note that for this process of inviting users, we can only invite one user at a time. So if we want to invite multiple users, we'll have to do so, again, each individually after we've completed this invitation. All right, so we'll now go ahead and click on Send. That invitation is off. And now we'll see that the Users tab, it displays a list of accepted and pending users for our cloud team. And to the right of this user list, we can view the number of available licenses for the team. That's convenient. We know how many licenses are in play in our deployment. Now, just being invited to a FileMaker Cloud team, that's not going to provide access to this FileMaker Cloud's hosted apps. An invited user must additionally be enabled as a licensed user. So to manage licensed users, we'll click on the icon here that's on the furthest right column of the user list. And the context menu that appears, it includes an option to enable or remove as a licensed user. Now, what's the difference between removing as a licensed user and deactivating that account? Well, a deactivated user, that means that user will not be able to access the FileMaker Customer Console or any other resources that require FileMaker ID. Removing a licensed user, that just means they won't have access to the FileMaker custom apps, but they could still have access to the FileMaker Customer Console. Now, deactivating an account, that will not remove the user from the team, and that account can still be reactivated at any time. Now, as I just mentioned, not every person in the team needs to be a licensed user. So take, for example, a team manager that will never need access to hosted apps, but they can continue administering the FileMaker Customer Console and the FileMaker Cloud Admin Console. But if the team manager needed access to the apps, then they'd have to be enabled as a licensed user. So it's important to note that sharing licenses or removing someone as a licensed user to free up a license, that's out of compliance. Each unique user requiring access to the team's hosted apps, regardless of frequency of use, should have their own uniquely designated license. Now, focusing on the user list, there's a column named User Type. And the two statuses for user types is managed and external. The status typically depends on the team and its relation to when the user's FileMaker ID account was first created. So for example, imagine an invitation is sent out to a user who has never created a FileMaker ID account before. After creating the FileMaker ID account during the invitation process, the user will appear in the FileMaker Cloud team as managed. Again, since the team added a brand new FileMaker ID user, that user's FileMaker ID activation is now managed by that team. Alternatively, imagine an invitation is sent to a user who has an existing FileMaker ID account. So maybe this user already belongs to a different FileMaker Cloud team. So after accepting an invitation, this user will appear as an external user type. So if we look at an external user, instead of deactivate, the context menu now has an option to remove the user from our team. Now, since the user's FileMaker ID activation is not managed by this FileMaker Cloud team, it's not possible to deactivate this account and block access to FileMaker ID related resources. So shifting gears, aside from joining FileMaker Cloud teams through Team Manager invitations, an existing FileMaker Cloud user can also request a transfer of management of their FileMaker ID account to a different team. To do so, talk to a team manager from the desired FileMaker Cloud team and obtain that FileMaker Cloud team's team ID located on the subscription tab. Once you have the team ID, the user can open up their FileMaker Cloud profile page and enter the team ID of that new team before submitting their request. That user can still be invited as a member of their old FileMaker Cloud team, but any decisions regarding their FileMaker ID activation will be managed by their new team. The last few items about the users page. At this time, the search bar will only search for usernames and email addresses. So for example, you won't be able to search for a list of licensed users. And there currently is not a way to sort the user list, so the licensed users float to the top. Groups allow for easy account management across FileMaker Cloud hosted apps. After groups are created in the FileMaker Customer Console, the groups will be added as accounts in the apps. And then changes made to those groups in the FileMaker Customer Console will automatically be reflected in the app's groups accounts, saving time spent making individual account changes to each app. Here, we added a group named admins. And users can only be added one at a time. So for each account that you want to add to this group, you'll have to repeat this process. Now we'll add a second group named Sales Team. If an attempt is made to host the app in its current state, an error will appear. An app must have an associated FileMaker ID account or group in order to be hosted in FileMaker Cloud. In the authentication dropdown, FileMaker Cloud teams appear alongside the external authentication options. So click on New Account and select a group or FileMaker ID account from the list. And for further clarity, click on the information icon that appears when you hover over a group to view all of the accounts associated with that group. If you need to add or modify a user or group, an easy way to access the FileMaker Customer Console is to just click on the icon to the right of that new account. This will quickly bring up the FileMaker Customer Console group page. The app is now ready to be hosted by FileMaker Cloud, and similar to previous deployments, we'll upload the apps to FileMaker Cloud through the share icon in the status toolbar. Now users, they're no longer required to know the IP address of the host machine for access, because when you're logged in with a FileMaker ID account, all associated FileMaker Cloud teams will automatically appear in the host list. And just like that, we've uploaded our FileMaker app to FileMaker Cloud, and we're ready to access and share with our teams. All right, so the FileMaker Customer Console, it offers a one-stop shop for admins to better manage the FileMaker Cloud environment and for users to easily access their FileMaker Cloud hosted apps. So let's start by heading to the top of the FileMaker Customer Console. We'll click on the drop-down menu to view a list of associated FileMaker Cloud teams. I just have one team here, but if I was a part of multiple FileMaker Cloud teams, that would be shown here in a list. So we just select the appropriate team to manage the users for that team or to access the correct listing of custom apps. Now in the upper right corner, I'll click on this icon here to view notifications related to the FileMaker Cloud environment. Now notifications, they might include acceptance messages from invited users or limit warnings. So for example, notifications will be sent when storage and data API usage are at 80 or 100% of their limit. Additional notifications for CPU and memory will be sent when 80, 90, or 100% of their limits are hit. All right, so we'll scroll down a bit, and down here at the list of the hosted apps that we have, they're displayed at the bottom of this FileMaker Customer Console homepage. And if appropriate extended privileges are enabled, we can launch these custom apps directly in FileMaker Pro Advanced, FileMaker Go, or WebDirect. We can also use this show and sort by menus to quickly filter the list of hosted apps. Now we'll go ahead and we'll skip the user and groups tab because we already explored those. So let's click on the hosts tab. Now, one of the main benefits of this host tab is access to the FileMaker Cloud admin console. Now, there's some terminology here on this page like hosts and drive count that may give the false impression that multiple drives or hosts would be managed here, but at this time, access is limited to just one host and one drive. Now, the IP address is listed here, therefore whitelisting, enabling outbound traffic purposes, external SQL sources, connections, etc. Like we mentioned previously, you don't need to give your clients the IP address of the host because the FileMaker Cloud hosts, they're automatically tied to the FileMaker ID accounts. So when you log in with a FileMaker ID account in something like FileMaker Pro Advanced, for example, you'll automatically see a list of your associated FileMaker Cloud teams in the hosts window. All right, so we'll click on the FileMaker Cloud admin console. We'll bring that up here. And if the FileMaker Customer Console's purpose was to provide easy user onboarding and compute or instance management, the FileMaker Cloud admin console's purpose is to manage system configurations, backups, and custom apps. So if you've managed FileMaker Server or FileMaker Server for AWS, this will be a really familiar experience for you. So for example, there are similar actions related to app management. So I'll click on the databases tab here, and we'll click on one of these databases, and you can see this is where we can close, open, pause, or download databases just as we expect. However, there's a new option here, show encryption password. Why is it there? Well, in order for a custom app to be hosted on FileMaker Cloud, encryption at rest must be enabled. So if encryption at rest was not enabled prior to you uploading your custom app, encryption at rest will then automatically be enabled. A encryption password will automatically be generated during the upload process. And that encryption password will be retrievable here on the databases tab. All right, let's click on the backups tab. And this backup page, again, it should look really familiar to those of you who have used FileMaker Cloud for AWS. Here, backups are automatically created every 20 minutes, and a backup is stored for 30 days before it is removed and replaced. Additionally, backups can be preserved through the preserve backup option. So let's go ahead and preserve a backup here. And then both regular or preserved backups, they can be used to restore, but new to FileMaker Cloud is the choice to restore a specific app or multiple apps in lieu of only being able to restore the entire backup at once. So we should point out here that while there is an interface for backups, there is not an interface for scheduled scripts in the FileMaker Cloud admin console, but scheduled scripts, they're still supported. You just have to manage them through the FileMaker Cloud admin API, again, similar to what you had to do with FileMaker Cloud for AWS. Now let's click on the configuration tab, and this configuration page, this is where idle times can be set and logs can be downloaded and viewed. Here we can take a look at the list of the logs that are available to you in FileMaker Cloud. And then if I click on the auto maintenance area, it's important to understand that FileMaker Cloud will be restarted once a day for maintenance, and this restart It happens within an hour after 7 o'clock Universal Time. So that's about 12 a.m. Pacific, 1 a.m. Mountain, 2 a.m. Central, and 3 a.m. Eastern Time. So this scheduled restart, it's always enabled and it can't be disabled. But if you do have users who are connected, it's not going to run while users connect unless there's an auto maintenance for a critical update. In that case, users may be disconnected so that restart can happen. All right, let's click on the Connectors tab, and this page includes information about FileMaker Cloud's Data API, OData, and ODBC. Now note, Data API and OData, they share an annual limit of data transfer, which is based on the formula 24 gigs times user count, right? So a 5-user deployment would have an annual limit of 120 gig of data transfer for, again, both Data API and OData requests. And then for ODBC, again, this is something really familiar if you used FileMaker Cloud for AWS. All right, let's click on the subscription tab, and this page is where instructions for canceling FileMaker Cloud can be obtained. Please note that if FileMaker Cloud is terminated, the custom apps, they'll be held for a period of 45 days before removal. All right, let's close the FileMaker Cloud admin console and we'll reopen the customer console, and we'll click on the settings tab. Now, if we click on the edit button, we can change the name of the FileMaker Cloud instance. Now, after editing a team name, the new name will appear within the FileMaker customer console and in the host window in the FileMaker Pro Advanced and FileMaker Go. But please note, this is not a setting for custom domain names, which are not supported at this time in FileMaker Cloud. Onto the subscription tab, and here on the subscription page, this is where tasks such as modifying compute size, adding users, or downloading software takes place. So at the top left of the subscription page, you'll see the Your Team subscription section, and this little section is only visible if you're a team manager. And what's important about this section is that the team ID is listed here, which is useful for things like transferring into or out of a FileMaker Cloud team. If we scroll down, you'll see that I'm using a trial of FileMaker Cloud here, and there's a convert trial button in the bottom left corner of this page. But in the full version, this button will actually say subscription, and this is where you can launch a new page where you can add additional compute size, add additional users, add additional data API and OData transfer. Now, if we click on the downloads page, here is where we can download FileMaker Pro Advanced software and the license certificate for FileMaker Pro Advanced. If you already have FileMaker Pro Advanced from an existing non-FileMaker Cloud deployment, it's not necessary to download the certificate for FileMaker Cloud access. Instead, you can add FileMaker Cloud as a host in the existing FileMaker Pro Advanced, or open a saved link to a FileMaker Cloud custom app to unlock the FileMaker ID features in your FileMaker Pro Advanced. Keep in mind that a FileMaker ID account and a unique FileMaker Cloud license is still required for existing users, in addition to, at minimum, having a copy of FileMaker Pro Advanced 18 v3.
Thanks, Ryan, for the great demo. With the new FileMaker Cloud, there are many advantages, including fewer clicks for faster onboarding, better reliability, and security to protect your apps, and much, much more. Now, it's worth noting some considerations before migrating to FileMaker Cloud. For example, FileMaker Cloud does not support anonymous users. In addition, FileMaker Cloud needs to use FileMaker ID in order to authenticate. Therefore, it does not support external authentications. It's also worth noting that server-side plugins are not supported with FileMaker Cloud. And custom web publishing is also not supported with FileMaker Cloud. Although in that case, what you can do is you can transition your custom web publishing pages to use the Data API. And finally, it is also worth noting that you need to be on the most latest version of both FileMaker Pro Advanced and FileMaker Go in order to be able to use FileMaker Cloud. And finally, a little bit about pricing and licensing. Every user will cost $39 per month, and that is billed annually. Now, there are multi-year options available for those of you who are interested in that, and there is also nonprofit and educational pricing available as well. And with every purchase of FileMaker Cloud, 1 year of free support is included in the price. And now it's time for Q&A. Please enter your questions now. And Brian, what kind of questions do we have?
Well, thanks, Steve. And feel free to join me in the Q&A as well if you see anything that catches your eye. First, as always, we have a lot of people asking whether you'll get a link to the recording. Absolutely. So after this session, you'll get a link to the recorded webinar for you to review at your own pace. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll start with, do you have two-factor authentication? Two-factor authentication, it is automatically built in with the FileMaker ID. So during your setup, when you create a FileMaker ID account, you'll be prompted to enter a mobile phone number, and then whenever time that you log in, you'll get sent a verification code. You do have the ability in your profile page in the FileMaker Customer Console to disable that. But again, that two-factor authentication is automatically built into your FileMaker ID account. All right, the next question. All right, we have a question about storage. So does the included 6 GB per user data storage, does that apply to backups as well? Great question. So in the storage amount that you get, the only thing that's going to be metered against that are your custom apps and your remote containers. So your backups or your preserved backups, those will not count against the amount of storage that you have. So like 6 GB per user, and you have 5 users, like 30 gigs. If you had 10 GB of backups in there, for example, you would still have, like 30 gigs, for example, of information for you to play with. The next question, any plans to connect FileMaker Cloud to Azure AD? Well, at this time, as noted, the sole authentication method is FileMaker ID. External authentication, like you could have with the on-premise software, like Azure, like our OAuth options, like Azure, Google, Amazon, they're not currently supported. Although we are looking at extending the ways that we could authenticate against FileMaker Cloud. In terms of plugin support, right now, server-side plugins are not supported. That said, the plugins associated with your FileMaker Pro Advanced will still work.
So this is Steve. I'll take some questions here. The first one is, as part of the backup feature, can you download an individual file? So that's actually a really good question. So the way that the backups work is you restore a backup and you get to choose which files you want to restore from that backup. When you do that, what it'll do is it will keep your existing files in place and will create a restored version of the file with a timestamp appended to the end of the file name. At that point, you can download that file. We don't have a way to directly download a file, but that would be the way that you would go about downloading a file if you wanted to do that. Another question is, what happens if a FileMaker ID user is added to more than one group? So when you're adding users and groups in the FileMaker Customer Console, we don't do any error checking in terms of adding somebody to more than one group. Now, in some cases, that might be desirable. However, I suspect that that will probably produce some results you weren't expecting, especially when you start adding those groups to your custom apps in FileMaker Pro Advanced. The reason being is when you're in the Managed Security dialog box and you have a series of groups, we start authenticating from the top of the list and we work our way down. So if somebody is in more than one group, it's going to authenticate against the first group that it finds that person in, and then it's going to stop. Now, maybe that will be the group that you wanted to authenticate against, but maybe not. So my tip would be just make sure that when you're in the FileMaker Customer Console that you only add an individual user to one group to avoid any confusion in the future.
And just to clarify there, the managed security dialog window, that's in the custom app when you're adding that account to, or the FileMaker ID account to your custom apps, similar to what you saw me demonstrate today. And that behavior is exactly what you would do, or what you would experience in your on-premise FileMaker server. So if you have, if you're associated with like a local account and an externally authenticated account, in that managed security dialog list, depending on the order, that is the first one that you're associated with, which the account that you're associated with, or group that you're associated with, that's what's going to be authenticated. But I would say that there may be scenarios where you may, FileMaker Cloud can host up to 125 databases. You may require different access in one FileMaker custom app than another FileMaker custom app. So if you were to be put in different groups, that's okay. You can have that in your FileMaker customer console. But again, in terms of how you would want them to be authenticated, you just want to make sure that if they were to have multiple accounts in a custom app, then you would want to make sure that the appropriate one that you want them to authenticate against is always at the top of the list for them. Another question we have here is whether FileMaker Go is included in FileMaker Cloud, or is that a separate subscription purchase? Great question. When you purchase FileMaker Cloud, you get the entire platform. Okay, so you're going to get downloads for your FileMaker Pro Advanced. You'll be able to access via WebDirect. You'll be able to access the FileMaker Go, and you'll have the ability to integrate with our data API or OData. So even like our SQL integration. So you have the full access to the full platform. FileMaker Go is included. In the FileMaker customer console, I'm accessing it via desktop. So if I click on an icon, I'm only going to see open in WebDirect or open in FileMaker Pro Advanced. But if I open up the FileMaker customer console on an iOS device, for example, I would then see open in WebDirect or open in FileMaker Go. The point is, you absolutely have access to FileMaker Go. Go ahead and download that off of our App Store. That doesn't require a separate subscription purchase. The next question that we have here is whether the data stored is protected by any standards like HIPAA, FERPA, et cetera. The same kind of applies with like on-premise, in that just locking down one area of your deployment isn't going to make your FileMaker deployment compliant, right? So just because it's hosted on FileMaker Cloud doesn't mean that you wouldn't have to secure your data within the custom app, or build your audit pieces within your custom app as well. So out of the box, I wouldn't say that these things meet the different compliances, but just like any other FileMaker deployment, you can certainly build your deployment to meet those compliances. The next question, is FileMaker Go available for Android? FileMaker Go is native to iOS, but if you recently reviewed our public roadmap, which was about a week or two ago, we did reveal plans potentially for some Android products in the future. Those are things that we're just looking at right now. Steve, did you see anything here?
So there's a question about whether or not you can use the copy of FileMaker Pro Advanced that you download from the FileMaker customer console to access files that are hosted with FileMaker server, or files that are stored on your local hard drive. Absolutely. There really isn't anything special about the copy of FileMaker Pro Advanced that you download from the customer console, other than it is FileMaker ID aware, which means that it's compatible with FileMaker Cloud. But otherwise, it is the same FileMaker Pro Advanced that we all know and love, and you can use it like you would any other version of FileMaker Pro Advanced. And I believe Ryan mentioned it in his demo. You do need to use 18.0.3 or higher in order to access files that are available in the cloud.
All right, back to restoring files. I have a question here. If I restore a file and the file size of the restored file plus the current file exceed my storage limit, will I be able to restore? and the process complete. Unfortunately, no. If you're going to exceed your storage limit, then that restoration wouldn't happen. If you were at your limit, for example, you wouldn't be able to do anything that increases the size. Like you wouldn't be able to add a record, for example, or drop in a new media. So if you were to restore a file and it's within that storage limit, that's fine. If you try to restore a file and it's not, it's outside of that limit, then it wouldn't go through. I have quite a few questions here asking about anonymous users in FileMaker Cloud. At this time, anonymous users is not supported. As mentioned, FileMaker ID, that's the sole authentication method for FileMaker Cloud. So what is involved in FileMaker ID? One, you need a unique ID account, right? You can't share an account. And then every person who needs access to your custom apps has to be uniquely licensed as well, right? So given those two factors, having anonymous users where sharing is inherent, it just wouldn't work. That said, those are also discussions that we're having in-house, looking at ways that we may potentially be able to address that particular obstacle. I have some questions here as well about is there pricing for users lower than 5 at this time? 5 is the minimum that you can purchase with FileMaker Cloud. If you need less, there's always on-premise that you can use. We have FileMaker Cloud for AWS, which is still active until January 1, 2022, I believe. So there are some options there. Again, in terms of the questions we're potentially having, best option.
I have one question here. It says, can I upload a file that I created in FileMaker Pro 16 to FileMaker Cloud? So the answer to that is absolutely. Any file that supports the FMP12 file format can be uploaded to FileMaker Cloud. But as Ryan mentioned in the demo, you will need to do some things to your file. You can't have any files, or I'm sorry, you can't have any accounts that are full access that are open, meaning that they don't have a password. So you'll need to make sure that all of your accounts that have full access have passwords. And of course, you're also going to need to modify your custom apps to use the FileMaker ID users and groups that Ryan showed you. But other than that, and then of course, encrypting your file, those are the 3 main things that you'll need to do to get any FMP12 file up to the cloud.
Let me the next question about WebDirect. How do the users work if you have clients that need to access files via WebDirect? So I'm assuming that you're asking from a licensing standpoint. If you're not, please let me know. But we'll take it in 2 paths. How does users work? We'll talk about how you can connect via WebDirect, and then from a licensing standpoint, right? So connecting via WebDirect, it's the same thing as on-premise. You need to enable the custom app in an account in the extended privileges area. You need to enable at least one account to have access for WebDirect, and then WebDirect needs to be enabled in your FileMaker Cloud instance. And then from there, you just go to the appropriate WebDirect URL, or in the FileMaker Customer Console, again, easy one-stop shop access. You can just go to the appropriate database, click on it, and then say open via WebDirect. So there's a lot of similarities to what you'd have to do with on-premise. Now, if you're talking about it from a licensing standpoint, it was similar to what we just talked about with anonymous users, right? So in FileMaker Cloud, every person that's going to be accessing your FileMaker Cloud needs to be unique. They need to have their own FileMaker ID account. So even via WebDirect, when you try to open up a file, you'll get prompted to log in with a FileMaker ID if you haven't already signed in, right? And again, with FileMaker ID, we can't share accounts. So if you're looking at it from like an anonymous user standpoint, maybe like our site licensing has, that's not available. Again, it's all uniquely licensed users in FileMaker Cloud. let's see. We had a question here about auto maintenance and what happens if someone is logged in and performing some tasks while the auto maintenance occurs. It's true, like we had mentioned in the demo, auto maintenance happens once every day. It's just good housekeeping. But what happens, and this is written in the FileMaker Customer Console, but if people are logged in and they're making edits to your custom app, then the auto maintenance will not happen. But if we're pushing out a critical update, then the users will be prompted to log out, and then the auto update will perform. Do you have any other questions here, Steve?
Looking.
Let's do about one or two more if we can. Does the $39 also cover the FileMaker Pro Advanced license? Yes, like we talked about, you get the full FileMaker platform when you purchase FileMaker Cloud. And like we showed in the subscription tab of the FileMaker Customer Console, you'll be able to download your FileMaker Pro Advanced there. We have some questions about how does FileMaker Cloud work with existing deployments? So this is a good question. Many of you may be new to FileMaker and you're looking at FileMaker Cloud as an option, but then there are others of you who are using some of our current licensing, like a user licensing deployment or a concurrent connections deployment. And how do those existing deployments play with FileMaker Cloud and the licensing that you have with FileMaker Cloud? So we'll look at it through two lenses. One, if you're starting as a FileMaker Cloud user, so you have a FileMaker Pro Advanced that you downloaded from your FileMaker Cloud, and then we'll look at it from the other side, where if you have something like a user licensing deployment and you have a FileMaker Pro Advanced from your user licensing contract and you want to access a FileMaker Cloud hosted database. Okay, so two different scenarios, and we'll start with the first scenario. If you have, or if you're starting with FileMaker Cloud, okay, so you've been licensed under FileMaker Cloud, you've downloaded FileMaker Pro Advanced that's tied with your FileMaker Cloud. If you try to access an existing FileMaker server deployment, user licensing, concurrent connections, that's arbitrary, then that's okay. You'll be able to access it without any obstacles, without any issues. Just note that your FileMaker Cloud, FileMaker Pro Advanced, if you do connect to a concurrent connection server, it will eat up a one of those concurrent connections, okay? So if you have a FileMaker Cloud, FileMaker Pro Advanced accessing your concurrent connection server, and you have 15 concurrent connections, then you'll now have 14 available connections, okay? So we'll eat up a connection, but you can access it without any problems. Again, same thing with user licensing server or a site licensing server. Now, let's look at that on the flip side. If I have a FileMaker Pro Advanced under a user licensing contract and I want to access a FileMaker Cloud, can I access that without any obstacles? Well, what's going to happen, like we talked about, what's the only way that you can authenticate against FileMaker Cloud? One, you need to create a FileMaker ID account, right? So that's one thing you'll need to do. And then two, like we had mentioned, you'll need to be uniquely licensed for that FileMaker Cloud as well. So in that scenario, you may have to be double licensed. So you'll be licensed underneath your user licensing contract or your existing contract. And then you'll also need to be uniquely licensed underneath your FileMaker Cloud license as well. So two different scenarios. Long story short, FileMaker Cloud, FileMaker Pro Advanced, access without having to purchase any additional licensing. But if you're an existing user and you want to access FileMaker Cloud hosted databases, you'll have to be additionally licensed underneath that FileMaker Cloud instance. All right, that's all the time that we have for today. On behalf of Claris and Steve, it was our absolute pleasure chatting with everyone. We really hope you're excited about this FileMaker Cloud product. It really is just the first step into this brand new cloud first strategy that we're all really excited about and the things that we're hoping to deliver in the oncoming years. But with that, have a fantastic rest of your day, and we hope to see you on another webinar soon.